Okay, we're going to talk about Timothy 2, 4 and 7. And this is a scripture from Timothy. He says, I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith. And that's the title of my sermon this morning, is Finishing the Race. And I thought, this is so great. This is our last day here in 2017. We're finishing today, and we're going to start a new race tomorrow. And it's so neat because Paul was finishing his race. And the most amazing thing, Paul was such a bad person to begin with, and he turned out to be such a good person. I mean, if Paul can change that dramatically, there's room for all of us. We can change. But here Paul is going to Ephesus. He knows he's going to be put in prison. Well, he was in prison when he wrote this, and he's going to die. But his enthusiasm for God is just absolutely amazing. He's praising God. He's writing this letter to Paul and encouraging him that when he's teaching at Ephesus that he should help these people get out of the rut that they're in.
Yes.
And these people were really bad. They were misquoting the Bible. They were doing all crazy things. Like they weren't preaching. They were really causing dissension in the church. They loved to argue a lot. And even the ladies, it became a fashion show at the church. And it was the rich ladies that could dress real fancy, and it turned out that was all the people who were coming, were the rich ladies, because the poor ladies couldn't afford to buy these fancy clothes. So it just took the total meaning away from church. And so he realized that, and we're going to talk about some of the things that Paul talked about. I want to start out, when does a person start finishing? I mean, is there a line which we cross in the process of life where we think, okay, I'm going to start finishing now? It looks to me like we're actually starting to finish the moment we begin. Now think about that, and relate this to a track meet, relate this to a race. When the racers begin to run, they're in their little corral, and they take off when the gun is shot, and they run their race. And their main goal is the finish line. That's all they can think about. That's all they can do. Yes. And you've probably seen some of these applications and pictures on the TV and news where they say a racer should never look behind him while he's running. And even it happened at the Olympics. They expected this one racer to win. He glanced to the side to see where his opponent was, and guess what? The opponent was passing him on the right, and he glanced to the left. Wow. And he came in second place. He took his eyes, it took the focus off the winning line. He took it off of what his main purpose was. And sometimes we do that too. I want to tell you something about my daughter. My daughter Sandy has been racing for years. She's a runner, and she runs every day. But on Saturdays she meets up with 10 of her friends, and they run 10 miles every Saturday. And it's amazing because they have got a finish line that's unbelievable. And their finish line, and you're going to love this, is Starbucks. and boy, do they run the last mile to get to Starbucks. And I don't know if Starbucks is your finish line, but we all seem to have a finish line somewhere. But I wanted to tell you about that story. The book of Timothy tells us that Paul was in prison and he was sentenced to die. So Paul writes a letter to his friends who are going to take over the race for him, because he's getting ready to pass the baton on. So Paul left his co-workers, and as Timothy was in Ephesus, he had to start dealing with these, they call them the renegade people. And so Paul went back to Ephesus also. There he suffered a great deal of harm from Alexander, one of the leaders of the church. He was imprisoned in Rome, and he expected this time that he would die, and he was going to die. Paul had ordered Alexander to step down from leadership, but he continued to oppose Paul, and he had the people of the church so upset that they didn't listen to Paul. And so the whole congregation, the whole church joined Alexander and left Paul out. So Paul's letters include challenges to stay faithful in the true message and in the race. Paul reminds Timothy that in the days before the open appearance of Jesus Christ as King, there will be lots of trouble. And actually, he was talking about the rapture.
Yes.
And it's amazing they were talking about the rapture then, and we still talk about it today. And so I gave you a little pass out there, and there's going to be some items that this is what Paul was talking about. And he gave a warning, and the warning was against false teachers. Against is our answer there. When I was on my way to Macedonia, I urged you to stay in Ephesus so that you could instruct certain people to stop teaching false doctrine. And then the next item was the guidelines for behavior in a church. He's writing these down so they can follow these guidelines so they won't forget. Timothy, I'm giving you this instructions in keeping with the prophecy made earlier about you so that you could follow them and you may continue to fight the good fight. And then he talked about submission and prayer to the authority. The authority is the answer. First of all, I urge you to offer petitions, prayers, intercessions, and expressions of thanks for all people. And most of these have a chapter for each area, but I'm not going to go into that. I'm just going to hit the highlights. And then he wrote down the qualifications for leaders in the church. And I thought that was one of the most interesting ones that he gave. And I want to read out of the Bible in chapter 3 of 1 Timothy. And I'm going to start with the second verse. And he says, therefore, an elder must be blameless. He must be a husband of one wife, stable, sensible, respectable, a lover of strangers, and teachable. He must not drink excessively or be a violent person, but he must be gentle. He must not be argumentative, or he must not be a lover of money. He must manage his own family well and have children who are submissive to the parents. For if a man does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he might become arrogant or fall into condemnation of the devil. He must be well thought of by non-Christians. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Or he might fall into disgrace and trap set for him by the devil. Deacons, too, must be serious. They must not be two-faced, addictive to wine, or greedy, or addictive to money. They must hold firmly to the secrets of the faith with clear conscience. But they must be first tested. Then, if they prove to be blameless, then they become deaconess. Their wives must also be serious. They must not gossip. They must be stable and trustworthy in everything. Deacons must have husbands and wives, and must manage their children and their families well. Those deacons who serve well gain an excellent reputation for themselves and will give great assurance in the faith of their following Christians and to Jesus Christ. I hope to come soon. However, I'm writing this to you in case I'm delayed, so that you may know how a person is to behave in God's household. Very interesting. He really sets up the way you should be running your church and who should be running the church. And then the next item, that was it was quality of a leader's. So the leader is the fill in there on that one. And then prophecy about the future. Now the Spirit says clearly that in the last times, people will abandon their faith and they'll follow the deceitful spirits and teaching of demons and hypocrisy and liars. The next one is how to be a good servant. If you continue to point these things out to the brothers, you will be a good servant of Jesus Christ, nourished by the works of faith and by the healthy teachings that you have followed closely. How to treat others. Never speak harshly to an older man, but appeal to him as he were your father.
Wow.
Yeah, remember that when you're talking to Mike, will you please? Oh, sorry about that. Treat younger men like your brother, older women like your mother, and young women like sisters. But be absolutely pure. The next one is rules for godly living. If someone teaches false doctrine and refuses to agree with the hearty words of the Lord Jesus Christ and godly teaching, he is a conceited person and does not understand anything, that has an unhealthy craving for arguments and debates.
Yeah.
And then the last one would be continue to teach truth. But you have observed my teachings, my way of life, my purpose, my faith, my patience, my love, my endurance, my persecution and suffering that happened to me in Antioch and other cities. I was telling you about my daughter Sandy. She actually goes all around the country and goes to different races and has run several marathons. She's quite a young lady. She works at Riverside County in the health services for parents and to take care of their children. But I want to show you, she gave me something for Christmas, and I want to show this to you. I'm going to pull that off from there, you go. She has, actually, believe it or not, she has won about 30 medals.
Oh, my.
And her husband, Kevin, is a Finnish carpenter, and so he builds these cabinets, and believe it or not, she's got about 6 of these in a row with about probably 6 trophies in each cabinet. And they're from all around the country, and she put this together for me for Christmas. And so she was going to run a race in Atlanta, and she said the lady that was going to go with her couldn't go and asked me if I'd like to go along. And I said, well, sure. I need to take some vacation, so I decided to go with her to Atlanta to run the race in Atlanta. She had 2 races to run. And she says, well, Dad, why don't you run? I go, oh, I don't know about that. I do a lot of walking, but I don't do running. She says, well, you got about 2 months, and you could just work out a little bit and then maybe do light jogging. And so she gave me a plan how to do this, and I said, well, I'm good for about a mile, but for a 5K, I don't know if I can do that or not.
Yeah.
But so I worked on it for 2 months. We went to Atlanta, and it was the day of the race, and I was all ready to go. And there were 215 people in the race, and it started out actually down a street that the police had blocked off, and they had a big arch there with a starting line, and then several miles away they had the same thing with the finish line. And so I was ready to go. I'm going to get in this race, and I'm going to go. And so I started to walk up to the front, and she says, Dad, come back here, come back here. What? She said, come back here. She said, we don't want to get in the front, we want to get in the back. And I go, well, I'm really ready to go now. And she says, well, wait a sec. She said, if you get in the front, she says, all those fast racers are in the front. And you're going to start out, and those fast racers are going to go, pew, 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 pew. And she says, you're not going to get too encouraged when all these people are passing you. But she says, start in the back with me. And she says, we might be able to pass somebody. Because we're going to be back with the slow runners. Okay. So we started out. It's so amazing. And so I passed my first person. Wow, I was really feeling great, And I saw somebody in front of me, and I thought, I got to pass them. So I passed them. Well, anyway, went through the race. This is so funny. Went through the race, and at the end of the race, what they do is they give you a little bib to wear, like this. for the race, and there's a computer back here, computer chip, and they clock you when you go past the finish line, to the start line, and they click you out when you go past the finish line. So after the race, they called me up and they said, we have this award to give to you. And I go, really? Well, thank you very much. Out of the 215 people, I placed 175th.
All right.
So when I leave here, I'm going to run right out. But it was amazing. She figured out, she said, Dad, every 2 minutes you pass somebody. I said, that's amazing. I never ran that fast in my life. When I was trying to build my energy, I could run it in about 1 hour and 15 minutes. Well, they had me clocked, and I ran it in less than an hour. And so what they did is they presented me with my own personal.
All right.
Woohoo! Woohoo! There it is. But we had a great time, and God is so good. I'll tell you something. When you love the Lord, He'll just love you back more and more. And I just wanted to end with just this one thought for you. No matter whether you're young or old or in between, we can still finish by keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus and running the race for Him. Amen. That's it. Thank you.